Well, you kind of initially said something about yield exclusion, and I brought it up as well. Most people, let me just lay this out. I'm going to try to lay it out for you. Most people view yield exclusion as they heard that there was a number of years that they could get excluded out of their own calculated APH. Mm-hmm. And I think there's just a world of I won't say misinformation, just lack of information out there of what they really have as choices. Do you think the producers understand that they can drop, if it says they could drop 7 years, they don't have to drop all 7. They can drop the best 2, whatever they want to do.
I would probably say that in reality, there's still not the level of understanding of the provision that we would like to see. I think there is still a fairly significant number of people out there that have the misconception that if you take the yield exclusion that you're required then to exclude all of the years that are eligible to be dropped. And of course that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, you have the ability to pick and choose any individual year that's eligible to be dropped, to keep it or to retain that yield. I know in all the educational meetings that I've gone to, I tried to go to great pains to show them examples of not just years that you can drop all the eligible years and see how much it can move, right, but then to use that as kind of the segue into saying, look, and here's an example where a guy can drop 6 out of 10 years, but he's really only going to want to drop 5 because this 1 year, the trigger point for making him have that option was actually a trigger in a contiguous county. He actually has a very good yield, one of his highest yields ever, and he's going to want to keep that in. And so you do have the ability to pick and choose, but that just kind of, I guess, multiplies the combinations there that you can get to. But it also allows you to really fine tune that movement of APH from where it is today up to the level that you need. Going back to that original statement of know where you need to be, and then let's see what we need to do. Right. We've got a couple pieces of the puzzle now, and I know it's kind of after the fact, but as we go into next year, early March, we're going to have the same deal. We're going to need to know. Hopefully, we'll have an idea of what kind of coverage we need. When we know the insurance price, then we're going to know what we need to do to that APH to get to that point and at levels to give us that combination.
Most of the state of Texas, depending upon the crop you're farming, is going to have a couple of years you can drop. So there's not a non-decision for you unless you just want to ignore this. Right. In my opinion, if you ignore this, you're leaving money on the table. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting your whole operation by not giving it the protection it could get. Now, make no mistake about it. If you exclude 5 years, you're going to increase your APH sometimes very significantly. And guess what happens if you do nothing else? It all costs you more.
Yes, and that's the danger with yield exclusion. I think we kind of forget that when we move that APH up 30% or 40%, and I've actually seen some that come close to doubling. Right. Because of just the magnitude of the years, that the number that we can drop and the years that are left are some of our much better years. Right. When you get that whole magnitude of change, what we really need to look at then is, okay, how can we step backwards in our coverage levels but still maintain the same amount of coverage, right, and pick up extra premium subsidies and help defray some of those expenses. Right. And I think that's the most important thing about yield exclusion is, in most cases, there is additional cost associated with it, right? Because you're having either extra yield or the net effect of having a greater level of coverage compared to what our previous yields would have been. Right. And so it's there's a kind of a twofold mechanism there that makes stepping back in coverage kind of that counterbalance, right, to those increased costs.
And in most situations, that really works to the producer's advantage. And I don't. I think the education process on yield exclusion, because it was rolled out what I consider to be late in this process before sign-ups for Texas, especially starting in the South Texas, it was early in the year. I don't think the book is going to be written on yield exclusion until we get to next year's crop. where people can start looking at it and saying,
Right.
you know what, this is either going to make more sense. Recently, I talked about on one of these podcasts our tool that we rolled out right at the end. I will be fine tuning that thing much more, and it pretty clearly shows you the options.
Mm-hmm.
Could always be clearer. Just like every other economist, we have lots of numbers. We're trying to figure out a way to portray them. But frankly, the bottom line is this: it'll be a rare situation that you cannot drop back a level of coverage, you get the same amount of protection, and you get the benefit of the
So some additional subsidy.
the yes.
Yeah.
And so it'll be a rare situation. There'll be some that you could point out to me, but you need to look at it. And that's all I've ever said is people need to look at all these things as they affect their operation.